This will be my final post in the mental hospital, at least for now. I'll explain. Last night I came to work prepared, not just for my night shift, but to explore the sub-basement tunnels afterward. My backpack held an extra flashlight, an 8-pack of batteries, a can of anti-rust spray for the elevator, and the locks along the way. Water, food, lighters, and matches, plus a couple of candles for good measure. I also included a large knife, which I would put around my waist once I got down there. I was wishing I had a gun. On the other hand, bullets ricochet, and who knows where one might end up if I fired a pistol down there. I could easily end up shooting myself, and that fact only made more obvious because I had no firearms knowledge or experience. Unlike most of the security guards around the hospital, I had no aspirations to become a cop. My plan was simple. I'd work my night shift, then at 7 a.m. when the day guard came on, I'd tell him I was going up to the roof for a smoke, and then I would just go down another ladder closer to the hospital entrance to get out and leave for the day. Matt hadn't seemed bothered or concerned when I used the exact excuse on him, and he was the one coming in to relieve me, so I didn't think it'd be an issue. I'd use the key that I'd stolen to go back down the elevator and explore. My headache was pounding. It was getting worse by the hour. It no longer went away completely when I slept. Instead, it hung around in my dreams. My dream self would complain about it to my dream companions. The dreams would turn into nightmares. I would have visions of myself chained to a post in the basement of Sentry Manor. Ice picks and sledgehammers being pounded into my skull by Doug, of course. His daughter laughing happily while she watched, swinging her legs excitedly from atop the plastic-wrapped table where she perched, asking, "Can I help, Daddy? Can I pull out his tongue next, please?" I would wake, and the sun from outside my window would assault me immediately. I would feel like a knife was being driven into my skull. I started taking 4 and 5 codeine painkillers at a time. My head was starting to feel fuzzy from the constant narcotic effect. They did little to help, though. When the time came this morning at the end of my shift, I was ready. Matt came in and we had a quick chat and discussed the issues of the night before. There hadn't been any. See, it had been quiet aside from another 6 patients that had gone missing. Everyone assumed they had absconded. I knew it may not have been that simple. Mary Ann, the queen bee nurse who worked on E3, interrupted us by buzzing to get out of the unit. Her shift was over. She looked up at the camera expectantly and waited for the click of the magnetic lock. I'd rolled my desk chair over, wheeling halfway across the room with one quick push of my legs. I hit the 5 button, then the 4, and she came out into the alcove in front of us, separated us by the glass window and locked steel door. The alcove where we would pass out a metal detector for the nurses to wave over the patients as they came back from their jaunts outside the unit. Their privileges. It was a medium-sized glass-walled room where patients and staff entered and exited the unit. I was about to look back at Matt when I noticed Marlene was smiling broadly at me. I was surprised and did a quick double-take. She had always hated me, I thought, though I couldn't determine why. The smile she had on now, she usually reserved for patients. She was trying to get them to do something they didn't want to do, and it faded immediately when she turned around. I had seen it on camera last night from one of the many monitors in my booth. The patient hadn't wanted to take his medication. She had said a few words to him, smiling as she was now, and he took the pill and swallowed them dry. She turned and looked away from me. Her face had gone hard and cold instantly. This grin, on the other hand, looked genuine. I was surprised to see she actually looked radiant, her white hair streaming out behind her as she walked past. "Good night, Jordan," she said, as she walked over to door number 3. It was morning, but when you work nights, that's what you say as you leave, as well as the prerequisite, have a good sleep, she tacked on in the end. She was actually being friendly. I couldn't believe it. I found myself smiling back before I could stop myself. I told you, I have a sickness, needing people to like me. You too. I waved at her and buzzed her through doors 3, 2, and 1 so she could get out. I looked back at Matt and saw him eyeing me strangely. "You two seem chummy," he said. That one's been a complete bitch to me since I started here. She called me an idiot the other day because the door got stuck. I told him we'd never really gotten along either. That was strange that she was so nice all of a sudden. Maybe she was just happy to go home for the day. I finished my report, told him my cover story. I was going up to the roof for a smoke, then would take another ladder down and out the front entrance to get home. He looked a bit more suspicious this time. It was a bit unusual, I suppose, but he said sure, and I climbed up the ladder with my backpack. His eyes watching me the whole time, his brow furrowed. I got up to the roof and found the old elevator chained up just as it had been before. I took the old key out of my pocket and gave the lock a spray with a lubricant canister that I had brought. I opened it up. I sprayed the elevator down with it as well, trying to get any moving parts. The last thing I wanted was to get stuck in that thing, probably die in there before anyone found me. Using the big screwdriver that had been left there, I pried open the elevator doors again, and I got inside. I sprayed down the lever that controlled the box and pulled the lever down to B2. The cage rattled and shook, and not as violently this time, and I managed to stay on my feet. I felt the box descend slowly into the darkness. As I got down to the lower levels, I found myself not wanting to turn on my flashlight. The darkness and cool air felt so good, and I felt my headache fading instantly. I wondered if my eyes would adjust down there if I gave them a few moments. The cage stopped with a sudden jolt, and I nearly fell over. I grabbed the steel bars and righted myself. I left the door closed for a minute to protect me while I waited for the dim outlines of the walls to appear. After several minutes, I finally was able to see slightly. My headache was gone, leaving not a trace of discomfort. It was the best I'd felt since I'd been down in the tunnels last. It was weird. The flies and the smell, they didn't seem to affect me. They didn't seem as bad this time. My brain fuzzy from lack of sleep and the effects of too many painkillers. I walked forward with my flashlight turned off, and I rushed my right hand against the walls as I walked, feeling its bumpiness and age with my fingertips. I finally came across the familiar graffiti. DL plus MB forever. I felt the carving with my fingers for a moment, like a pilgrim on a holy trek touching a sacred object. I moved on. I came to the intersection and already knew where I was going. Straight ahead into what I presumed to be the longest section of the tunnel, leading into the meat of the hospital. Rats and mice streamed past my feet, and I felt them brush against my legs in the dark, but they didn't bother me. The tunnel went on for a long time until another intersection where I was a little less clear where I wanted to go. I hesitated, and I was about to go left when I heard Samantha's high-pitched laugh from far ahead in the distance. Following the sound, I continued forward. At least I wouldn't get lost if I kept going straight, I thought. The tunnel continued for another long stretch, mirroring the never-ending hallway in the basement above. It helped that I knew the hospital well, so I wasn't scared of becoming lost. I just pictured the basement above me and used it as my guide. That plan went to hell when I came across a hole in the side of the tunnel. It appeared to have been carved out roughly and imperfectly by crude tools of amateurs. It opened up into a tunnel which descended downwards. The walls of this new tunnel were dirt, and it appeared to have been dug in the same amateur fashion. It was narrower, too, and I found that I had to get down on my hands and knees, even my belly in places, to get through. I elbowed my way past rats and mice, and they nipped at my hands playfully. They seemed friendly. I wanted them to like me, so I let them. The smell was no longer bothering me, I noticed. Couldn't even smell it anymore. Flies had become thicker, blanketing my face and tickling my eyeballs as they skittered across them. I didn't swat them away, I just continued to crawl forward. Eventually I came out into an opening. It was dim. My eyes slowly took in all the details. It appeared to be the vast cavern of a cave system, one beneath the hospital. This was what appeared to be a natural rock formation which resembled a ramp leading downwards. I walked down slowly, watching my footing as the dirt slipped away beneath my feet occasionally, threatening to send me sliding off into the dark pit yawning beneath me to my right. I stayed close to the rock wall on my left, leaning against it for comfort. I've always been afraid of heights. I finally got down on the floor of the cave and saw several tunnels opening up before me. I had no idea which one to go through next. I was at a crossroads again. I looked around and I saw details coming into focus in the darkness. In the area to my right was a shallow pit filled with bodies. Too many to count. Flies were gorging on them, making nests of eggs in the soft, rotting flesh as it decayed. Millions of maggots were squirming everywhere, all throughout. Rats and mice scampered around the pile, pulling off ears and fingers and munching on them noisily. Normally that sort of thing would bother me. I heard Samantha's laugh from behind me, close this time, and hands grabbed me before I could react. I saw human forms appear from the shadows and saw they had been waiting for me down here. They had been blending into the shapes of the cave. I hadn't even seen them, standing just a few feet away from me. As the person behind me zip-tied my wrists expertly, not too loose or too tight, I saw a face come into focus before my eyes. I was startled to see it was Marianne, the nurse from upstairs. The Queen Bee. "Hello, Jordan. So glad to see you," she purred. "We've been hoping you would come down here to meet us. We've been waiting for you." I looked around in shock to see that there were more than a few of them living down here. There were a dozen of them. More came into focus everywhere that I looked. "We've lived down here for such a long time," she said. "Some like you can quickly adjust. You were built for it. Our ancestors were cave dwellers, you know. For thousands of years along the way, during ice ages, people lived in caves. This is how it was meant to be all along." Her words, they were soothing, hypnotic. She stroked the side of my face, and I felt my body tingle all over. "You can cut him loose, Doc," she said. I felt a knife cut loose the restraints which had held my wrists. I stood there, looking at her as she spoke, flies crawling over her face and body, in and out of her nose. "You need to understand, though, we have to eat. And some are not meant to live with us down here. Sam, for instance." I thought back to the basement of Century Manor. The piles of body parts stacked like fresh butcher cuts, lined up on the tarp. So it appeared that Sam, the toady pedophile patient, had been a potential member of this group, but it appeared he hadn't made the cut. They fulfilled other purposes. He wasn't like us, besides. We could have never trusted him alone with the children, you understand? I nodded, entranced. A thought popped into my head. I tried to swat it away, but it persisted. I had to ask. "And what about Rhonda?" I asked, still under her spell, just barely able to make out the words. She smiled at me, flirtatiously, and touched my shoulder with her hand. I melted under her gaze, and I felt my knees buckle. How old was she? Her face looked so young, but her hand told a different story. I wondered if the lack of light down here kept you looking young longer. No sunspots or wrinkles when there's no sun, I thought sleepily. I was suddenly very tired. I wanted so badly to take a long nap. She never did answer my question, at least not that I can remember. She led me over to a soft spot on the ground with a pillow. I lay down in the dirt and put my head down, falling asleep instantly. I slept for a few hours, according to my phone, when I woke up. The light from the screen was far too bright and it hurt my eyes. Still, I felt like I should finish telling you all what happened to me. At least that I'm okay. And I owe you that much for following along this far. I'm going to be fine down here with the rest of the gang. We have everything we need. I typed this out with my phone on the dimmest setting possible on blue screen mode. Anything to get rid of the blinding light of the screen, which threatened to bring that terrible headache back. Just the thought of it made me sick. I asked Samantha if she could bring my phone upstairs next time she goes up, to play, so she can hit post on this when there's enough signal to get it out to you all. Thank you for hearing my story. Sorry it didn't turn out the way you might have hoped for me, but don't worry about me down here. We have plenty of fresh water from an underground spring. It's the cleanest tasting water I've ever drank. There's lots of food, too, if you don't mind eating only meat. It's pretty much a carnivore diet down here. At least I've been told. Except when Marianne brings down the occasional bag of veggies from the grocery store. She hates going there, though. Can't stand it, in fact. We do well enough on our diet of roasted meat. Although it's a bit tough and stringy, not much fat content usually. A lot of meth users and heroin addicts end up in the mental hospital. They don't always taste the best. Marianne tries to pick up good ones for us, though. It's Samantha tells me these little tidbits. And she and I have become fast friends. I was surprised to hear that she actually is a lot older than she looks. She doesn't get out in the sun much, so that stunts her growth. But she never gets wrinkles, though. Just like her mom. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching tonight's video. Or listening to tonight's podcast, because it's also a podcast on Spotify, or on Apple, or on Google, or anywhere else you can listen to a podcast. On a hot summer day, there's nothing better than a glass of iced tea, and thus for, you should check out my wife's tea shop, etsy.com/shop/ivorymonocletea. You can get numerous different types of tea, including a MrCreepyPasta tea, the Dark and Stormy Night, which, if you ask, you can get the MrCreepyPasta dabbing sticker on the front of it. And lastly, as always, I want to remind you guys, if you ever want to support the show, you can do so at patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And I really appreciate any time you guys can support the show, because honestly, I love you guys. You're all awesome. So, a very special thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Haha Saha, Ken Lenda Higuchi, Mazakine, Champinski, The Red Oak Shield Virus, G Weevil 3, Diana Kraus, Stephen Van Huss, Chance Burnett, Tristan Pelton, Nico Cowell, The Ginger Bros, Last Blade Song, Caleb Dougal, Sky Harbor, The Homeless Bird 93, Bobby Karen, Liam Newman, Aaron Stormcrow, Barbara Maceo, Thomas Burgett, S-Man, Kiri the Sloth, Bad Honey, Someone You Love, Said the King 56, Shadow Morningstar, Mad Marstomp, Mr. Thud, Patrick Schoolmeister, Z. Kearley, Wolfie Nums, Rafael Rodriguez, WR Axis, Prozac and Pancakes, Mike Bullock, Acid System, Lauren, Brian Ars, and Rumble Fox. And also a huge thank you to everybody who's down there in the description down below. You guys, as always, are the real MVPs, and I appreciate you more than I can possibly say. So thank you guys, thank you all for listening, and sweet dreams.